Created in 2005 and hosted by security industry veterans, Paul's Security Weekly is your source for in-depth coverage of the latest vulnerabilities, exploits, and security research. Our weekly security news discussion dives deep into the security issues we face today and potential solutions in a fun and lively atmosphere. Each week, we bring on guests from the security community to learn about their journey and discuss topics relevant to their work and research. You can also subscribe to our show by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Paul's Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher. We've recorded a ton of content over the years, so we created Spotify playlists featuring some of our favorite episodes, including interviews with Marcus Random, John McAfee, and Chris Roberts, to name a few. You can find them at securityweekly.com/starter packs.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our program. Here we are, the first full day. I've been here a couple days, but it feels like the first real full day of Black Hat USA 2003 here at Mandalay Bay. And I am pleased to be joined by Mike Fay, co-founder and CEO of Island. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, just to start, talk a bit about your background and how, the journey to forming Island.
Well, I started on the technical side as an engineer, worked my way up through cybersecurity, pre-sales, and helping customers succeed. Then became a general manager, and then president COO of a couple of larger cybersecurity companies. And I actually retired. I decided that I had done enough and I needed a break. And my co-founder brought me this idea for what if we change the way browsers work? And I found it very interesting, and the more I thought about it, it was so compelling. I had to join up with him, and we founded Island right in the middle of COVID. And ever since, it's kind of been this passion that we've had, and the passion stems from it's such a disruptive idea that's time has obviously come. It felt like a great thing to spend, the remaining part of my career on.
So the remaining part of your career is focused squarely on the browser.
Yeah.
Talk about why that is.
Yeah, so the
how it must be.
The browser is this amazing thing. If you think about how it came into companies, don't think about it like a consumer, but like an enterprise. It showed up as just part of the operating system.
Yep.
And we didn't think that much about it because when we first came in contact with it, we were looking at little static HTML pages. We got a little bit of information from them. And over time, we started getting more information. We started getting attacked from it. We started, browsing more interesting stuff. But as of late, all of our major applications are delivered to that browser platform. You're not going to go down on the show floor here and meet a company that's writing to a Mac or to a Windows. I'd say, all write to that Chromium open source project that is the browser. And so it became our operating system. But nobody invited it in as the operating system. And it is now this operating system, but it's consumer based and it serves an amazing purpose for those consumers. But when we look at it from an enterprise, there's so much we could do with it, and there's so much complexity that is originated by the fact that it doesn't cooperate with the enterprise. And it's really that understanding of the impact you could have on cybersecurity, on productivity, on the business, and the end user, and how you can make all of those situations better if you just took a look at it from the lens of what does a corporate, citizen need opposed to a consumer.
Yeah. And now everything is done through the browser.
Everything.
And so let's talk about some of the specific challenges. I know we've focused a lot of phishing attacks have just moved directly to the browser. But talk about what you see as the landscape right now.
Yeah, let's take it to even bigger than a single attack. What really happens, if you think about it today, for somebody to feel safe in a corporation, that business interaction is going to be backhauled to some centralized location where we determine if the website's a safe website. We're going to break the encryption that's not supposed to be broken. We're going to stare inside of it. Then we're going to slap it on a peering network to move it on its way. And then when we decide that the data we're interacting with is so important, we're going to try to block every port of export, the USB, the Bluetooth, and all these crazy things. And then when we have the audacity to say, well, what if they work on a BYOD device or they work on a phone? We're going to put MDMs and MDMs. And we do all of this because the browser didn't cooperate. And when we finally get super frustrated, We literally slap it in a VDI session. And that's so we have all these contractors and call centers that are literally backhauling to the backhaul to the governance process, when all it could be is a policy that runs on the browser that ensures our data is safe, our networking path is safe, and the interaction is safe. And then we can start to do things like automating the tasks that those call center workers do and those BYOD workers do. And that's what's really driven our success, is looking at the whole picture, not trying to just singularly focus on a given attack, but what if we're collaborative in that? So we often integrate into other security products to bring what they can do to the forefront, but we give them that built-in security approach opposed to outside looking in.
This is great because you answered my next question, which was, let's go through enterprise browser and what makes it tick. But talk about, the browser has become the tool now to conduct business.
Sure.
But consumer browsing, which obviously you're out to remedy. So talk about those differences.
Sure. Well, let's just talk about how you would use it. You get that shiny new Mac, that iPad, that Dell machine, whatever it is. And let's say you're one of the millions of BYOD users, right? Where you maybe you work for multiple companies. Or the reality is, when you go shopping and you go to entertainment, you use that consumer browser. It's amazing for you. Now you think about your enterprise browser as more of a portal. You click on that company's browsers. They click on it. Their policy runs it. Everything they need to have trust in that relationship with you runs inside of that. You get trust because you know your privacy is still intact. They're not taking over your machine. They're not trying to get involved with you and your doctors and everything else. But when it's time to go to work, you can do that. We literally work with some consultants that have to have 5, 6, 7 machines, and now it's just a browser. They can just change what company they're working in. And so that experience of the separation of work-life balance and the difference of the duality of those opens up so much when you separate it. When you're trying to do it all in one, you end up sacrificing something, whether it's your privacy, your productivity, your security, something gets put at odds. And this frees us up to rethink how that works.
Now, one thing I find particularly interesting is the integration of ChatGPT.
Sure.
And, I think it's a given that this week at Black Hat, AI is going to be pretty much all everybody is talking about.
It's a big topic.
There'll be an array of topics, but it's always going to come back to the question of AI as a solution and as a threat. But talk about the approach you've taken when it comes to ChatGPT and integrating it.
Sure. So luckily for us, what we did with ChatGPT can be replicated across all of the different platforms. So ChatGPT was obviously the first loud one, the big scene, so we went there, but we've done it across many since. And what we're able to do is bring to an organization the ability to have control over the operating system that's going to run, that browser. When should we let it run? How should we let it run? Are we using it to validate information? Are we using it to confirm, to boost productivity? Or is it describing medicine? Is it moving out information? And the challenge that organizations have is there's thousands of great use cases for AI, and there's a couple that aren't so great. And the couple that aren't so great are getting the focus and blocking all the productivity. So we integrated it in so you could have full control at a policy level over what that user experiences, does, and integrates with that AI environment, so we can give the control back to the corporation so they can embrace productivity much faster.
Yeah. And so this is interesting because when I'm in discussions about AI, there tends to, at least right now, be a lot of, among executives, kind of trying to stay away from it.
Yeah.
And you've chosen to embrace it.
Very much, yes.
So talk about that.
I've always felt that as a cybersecurity professional, we have to find a way. We are here to make our companies, productive, profitable. When we impede the ability to be productive and profitable, we forgot what our role is. We're a bodyguard, We don't block you from going somewhere. We enable you to go there and do your job effectively. And we saw that same thing with AI. when I sat down and I was sitting at a large banking conference, and the CEO of one of the largest banks in the world talked about the value of AI. He talked about how AI's true value at first is about confirmation. Did we make a mistake? Is this the right thing? Does this look right? Its ability to look over our shoulder and point out anomalies and point out those mistakes, you can use that anywhere. So we thought about, how do we let that show up, but keep us from uploading our primary data? And how do we measure that flow? You know, I use different extensions all the time. I'm terrible with grammar and things like that. The idea that I get a customer contract once a month that can't be uploaded, but the world suffers from poorly written emails as a result, that's something that we had to break. And so now we just gave it contextual aware engagement. So when can it run and what can it run on? And that's determined by that company's need for productivity, not by the security team's fear of what it might do.
So, but there do need to be some guardrails.
There do.
So talk about the guardrails that you've constructed around.
Yeah, I think we need to appreciate, depending on the AI system, and that's key, because we keep lumping all AI as ChatGPT, right? And that's certainly one of the most known. Not every AI exposes all data to everybody. Like, we have to appreciate that. But that is a major fear. We could be working on a major M&A activity, right? Something that would move the stock market, and we're out pushing those reports up, getting them to help us refine them, and all of a sudden somebody can query that environment and, you know, understand that insider information. So just a couple ways we always have to appreciate what is the data we're getting and what access are we getting. Automation's another concern. If you feed the data incorrectly and you ask it to take action, you could trick it into taking an action that would be detrimental. So we have to also control what happens to the AI response. Is there a human governor in that? Should there be one? If I'm a doctor, there should be one. Maybe if I'm applying this to a fast food order, we can take the risk. You know, if your Taco Bell order comes in sideways, we'll all live. And that's the kind of the thought process by company that needs to take place. Unlike, you know, you mentioned malicious attacks. Those are categoric. Nobody wants that phishing attack. It doesn't matter what you do. And so cybersecurity now has to evolve to go, situational awareness is going to be part of our future. And we've lived very much in a binary existence for the most part. And now we're going to have to evolve and really understand what the business is doing to enable it.
Into the brave future we go.
No doubt.
So, been great talking to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great week. Today, I think, will be the busiest of the days.
It is a busy one.
So,
thank you.
Have a great day.
Welcome back to Las Vegas Black Hat 2023. I'm Jeff Mann, one of the co-hosts of Paul Security Weekly, and I'm sitting here this afternoon with Karim Toubba, who is the CEO of a company called LastPass. Kareem, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Hey, just to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So CEO of LastPass, been here a little over a year, and spent, 24 out of the last 26 years, as we were talking about earlier, in and around cyber.
Sure.
One of the most interesting and dynamic spaces. And prior to that, I was CEO of a company called Security, which was in the risk-based vulnerability management space.
Yep.
That was acquired by Cisco, and then spent time at companies doing crypto, spent time most of my career in and around the product world.
Great.
Yep.
And a year at LastPass.
Yep.
Interesting timing.
It's interesting timing indeed.
Well, you know, welcome to the jungle.
Thank you. It's always fun to be here.
How are things been, let's say, for the last 6 months at LastPass?
Yeah, good. We've, obviously had an initial incident that the market was well aware of a couple of months after I came on board, but we've been doing a lot of work since then, including releasing and building some capabilities to not just shore up defenses, but more importantly, or just as importantly, really starting to make investments in and around passwordless, which really enables organizations and individuals to start thinking about what does the journey look like as I start to use that factor that not a lot of people had used historically in the world of something you are, something you have, something you know.
Right.
How do you start to use the something you are a little bit more, like biometrics and other mechanisms?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, on our news segment back, December, we certainly talked about the news of LastPass. And it got me thinking, because I have a cryptographic background and very familiar with something you have, something you know, something you are, and also have been doing PCI forever where that's a requirement.
Yep.
It occurred to me that people that use password vaults, that's no longer something you know.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, how many clients do I have where they don't even know their passwords? So they're technically not meeting the requirement of multifactor authentication, which is a PCI requirement.
Yeah.
And that sort of spun me off on a little research project. It was the holidays, and it was a squirrel that I chased for a while, but it made me realize that I'm not a big advocate that this industry is constantly evolving and constantly changing. The technology certainly is, but the idea of MFA, this thing that we all know, this mantra, has only been around less than 20 years.
Yeah.
2004 is the first time I've seen it in a published NIST document.
Yeah.
And it's kind of time to rethink the whole thing,
Yeah.
which I think is what we're going to talk about. To start, though, I love to, when we have a conversation about topics, just to make sure that everybody's at least somewhat familiar with what we're talking about. So could you give just a brief description of what it is you're talking about when you say passwordless?
Yeah, sure. So look, if you look at the sort of prototypical authentication paradigm, right? You and I went to a site or a service. We created an account, we put in a username and a password.
Right.
Those username and passwords got sent to the third party. They
Right.
stored it, encrypt it, do all the security around it.
Hopefully.
And hopefully, so you would hope.
Right.
And then from there, I would use those two components or credentials to authenticate myself routinely from any device. And so there's a lot of benefit to that. In theory, as we all matured, you would start to create better practices and hygiene around, random, unique,
Right.
long, strong, hopefully things that aren't susceptible to brute force passwords. But that becomes hard to remember when I have, over 200 logins across different services.
But in the beginning, there was only one.
But in the beginning, there was only one, right? And it's
There
a much
can
more
be
complex
only one.
world, a
Yeah.
much more complex world.
Yep.
But the idea of, and of course, with those came all sorts of threat vectors, but the idea of passwordless is that we all have things like our face, biometric mechanisms, fingerprints, things of that nature. And the world has moved on enough that whether you're talking about a device like a desktop that has fingerprint ID on it,
Right.
a device like your smartphone that has either Face ID or Touch ID enabled, or even third-party devices like Phaeton or YubiKeys, things of that nature, most of which most people don't have, but certainly most people have laptops and smartphones. You can actually, in fact, use the biometrics as an authentication means into a service instead of the username and password. And that's, at a high level, that's what passwordless is about. Now, there's a lot of technology on the back end. It just so also happens to be that the technology behind passwordless uses something called passkeys, which basically uses public-private key pairs and digital signatures that make it unique, much stronger, and takes out a whole category of potential attack vectors.
Right.
That security and IT administrators are constantly running around trying to scramble to defend against.
So at the risk of oversimplifying, passwordless is simply something other than the something you know.
Correct. It's something you are.
And it's something you are.
Correct.
Interesting, in my research, in I forget the years of the earliest writings about it. And of course, I came from the National Security Agency, and we used to be the authoritative source for all this stuff. And it shifted to NIST because NIST was in the unclassified world, and we couldn't talk about the things we did. But the early mentions of multiple forms of authentication, even from the very beginning, I think everybody acknowledged passwords are not a great idea, but it's what we had to start with.
Yep.
And the mecca 25 years ago was biometrics, but at the time there wasn't technology there to make it scalable and economically feasible.
Yeah. To roll out hardware.
To roll it out.
Yep.
The sort of the initial fallback was a lot of NSA, what appeared to be NSA driven ideas of some sort of cryptographic token. Yep. Remember a dongle?
Yep. Oh yeah. It was on the side of my belt. You used to pull it card. with X509
or
certificates
the
that you put on.
RSA, key fob,
Yeah,
that type
RSA,
of thing.
yeah, of course.
And that was in, I forget which 800 series it was, but there was a draft version where I first saw the something you have, something you are, something you know. But really, you should be using a cryptographic something. By the time it was published, and it was only a couple months later, it was something you have, something you know, something you are, and that cryptographic thing had kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
I haven't done the research to find out what was the politics involved
Yeah.
there. But okay, I'm more comfortable now with the definition of passwordless. Talk to me a little bit about what are some of the other things that are out there these days beside throw away the something you know.
Yeah.
What's the next best option, and is there still a need for, is more than one better than just one?
Yeah, I mean, look, multifactor in its construct is actually quite a good idea and has been. It's not just technically sound, but it provides another layer of security and capability, right? Because what do we know, having been in security forever? There's never a single solution. There's a constant evolution from an attacker perspective. And so, attackers are super smart. They eventually find ways to get around the technologies that we all build and deploy. And so this idea of multi-factor just makes the bar to pop a huge higher, which I think inherently is very good. I think that the real thing we have to think about is the usability of it, right? There's always this tension, especially inside of organizations, between practicality / usability versus security. Right. I mean, how many times have you been inside a room making that argument?
Let's call it what it is.
Right.
Convenience.
That's exactly.
And ultimately, it's not convenience. It's the cost.
It's the cost. Yeah.
In terms of the time it takes, the lost
productivity. That's right.
Things like
That's
that.
right.
So
That's
it's all dollars.
But it's also the familiarity of it, right?
Sure.
I mean, the world in and out of work has been. Those lines have been completely erased now, and so and I'm logging in a bunch of things, working on a bunch of devices, accessing a bunch of applications, and the lines are blurred. And so you want something that is familiar to users, because if you think about security and IT teams, what they predominantly want is something that is ubiquitous and that they know they're going to have a high adoption rate, and there isn't a huge amount of training to be done. So things that are multi-factor, whether you're using Duo technology or whatever technology, just even if it's got some geo component next to it that gives you an additional layer of security, is generally a good idea, matched with the capability to go passwordless. So if you can combine those things, then you're not only adding an additional layer of security, but you're really, again, removing yet another class of potential attacks against the user.
So kind of the obvious question for me is LastPass, Password Vault, something in theory it was the something you know piece.
Now it's something you have.
And now it's something you have.
That's right.
So what are you guys doing that's passwordless?
Yeah. So one thing to remember before getting onto that is that these transitions take forever, right? I mean, we talked about how long MFA has been around. Walk around the organization and ask people how many people have actually deployed MFA, right? S.S.O is another technology. It's been around for 10 plus years.
I do PCI, everybody.
Well, there you go. I mean, S.S.O has been around for a decade plus. Not every enterprise app is S.S.O enabled yet, right? Sure. So these transitions will take a while, and therein lies, I think, both the challenge but also the opportunity, because what sort of our view and our approach is, look, we're not going to wake up tomorrow morning with every application being password enabled. By the way, when I want to create a passwordless environment, yes, I have to do some things, create passkeys on the user side and create the right experience. I also have to inject some code into the application to make it password enabled. So there's a server side, app side code work, and then there's the client side work. So these transitions will take years. Right. And so the question then becomes, which sort of led to our approach after research, is to say, look, we want to create a passwordless experience to the user. So I want to be able to access my vault in a passwordless way, in a variety of passwordless ways, meaning that I want to use biometrics for my phone. I want to use a third-party device like Phaeton or YubiKey for the organizations that really want to sort of desegregate that. Okay. Today, we announced full FIDO2 compatible support for any FIDO2 devices, including YubiKeys, but smartphones and others. Okay. And that will give us the opportunity to allow users to have biometric and passwordless access to the vault. and then store passkeys inside of their vault if they're accessing a site that supports passwordless, or secure usernames and passwords inside of the vault, and let the vault determine what the backend needs. But to me as a user, I still experience a passwordless experience to the vault.
Gotcha. So yeah, I see the need for the transition, and in some ways cutting edge today, but 3 years from now, you'll look back and think, wow, that was really primitive how we did that.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Gotcha.
And you know, one of the best things that we can do as an industry, I think, is make these more complex, somewhat technical transitions transparent to the user.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the more we can all succeed, and that's not always an easy thing to do, but the more we can do that, the broader, the better we'll have at that conversation of that whole convenience versus security. Right.
Yeah, and that's been a goal, probably one of the most daunting holy grails of our industry from the very beginning.
That's
is
right.
To make the security transparent. Unfortunately, there's a lot of users out there that think there's transparent security in place where there isn't necessarily.
Yeah.
But somebody's surely got it covered. I wouldn't be able to do this. Somebody's got to be watching.
That's
It's
right.
somebody else's problem.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Any sort of last word, messages you want to get out to our audience?
Yeah. You know, I think that, you know, like many of these transitions that have occurred, you know, over the last 10, 20 years in tech in general, but in security specifically, there are always sort of key investments that have to be made up front. But you know, you sort of got to have staying power, and you got to have a clear strategy. And passwordless is a classic example of that. When you think about passwordless, and as I talk to organizations about this, they have to think about it in sort of multiple lenses, right? If you think about it pretty simply, I've got things that I access that are applications.
Right.
I've got things that I access that are systems, and I've got things that I access that are infrastructure. So I may be accessing VPN infrastructure. I may be accessing my laptop, desktop.
Right.
I may be accessing my CRM app if I'm a sales rep inside of an organization. And I think organizations have to think about each and every element, because the promise of password on the technical side, the reduction of the attack surface, the removal of certain attack vectors is clear.
Right.
But on the user side is the more you can think about it as a journey that addresses each one of those domains, if you will,
Right.
the more you're going to have success in getting users to adopt and have a uniform experience.
Right. So you're sort of in that early adoption evangelism, get the message out, get people to start thinking differently about it.
Correct.
And ease us into it.
Ease us into it. And then think about how you can, you know, because I'd love a passwordless experience to all of my personal applications as well, right?
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for it.
All right.
Thanks, Kareem. We could have gone on for hours. Check out securityweekly.com, LastPass BH for more information.